All right, welcome back, Anatomy, to part 4 of our nervous system notes. Hopefully, going to be our last part of our notes. Should get your notes filled in if you're doing working along with the student notes, which you ought to be. Hopefully, get all those completed that you can use them on quizzes and all that stuff leading up to our exams. So anyway, we've talked about the brain, but that's not the entire part of the nervous system. Remember, the nervous system made up the brain, the spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves that stem off from these structures. The spinal cord is the main pathway for information that connects these other two parts. It's located in this hollowed out area, shown right here. See how it's circled up? This hollowed out area of our vertebrae. Of course, that's a part of our skeletal system, called the vertebral foramen. Okay, the vertebral foramen. Your spinal cord runs right through these holes, through all the different ones. You've probably seen the skeleton in my room, that model. And you can kind of see this spinal cord is shown by this yellow little structure that runs through these foramens. There's a pair of spinal nerves that branch out from the spinal cord. It comes out of each segment of the spinal cord. Okay, and it comes out through the vertebrae, and then the peripheral nerves hang off those pairs of spinal nerves. Just thinking about these spinal nerves, they're in 31 pairs of spinal nerves. They're not individually named. They're kind of just numbered and grouped from the level from which they come out. Looking at the spinal cord, we see different regions of the spinal cord and how many pairs of the 31 spinal nerves there are. The cervical vertebrae makes up our neck primarily and our very upper back. There are 8 pairs of cervical nerves. Okay. Thoracic, this is the mid-back. This is the largest portion by far. The thoracic nerves, there's 12 pairs of them. So, branching out, one on each side of the vertebrae. Your lumbar, your lower back, there's 5 pairs. The sacral nerves, that's where your sacrum, we learned that bone is one of the ones we learned in the skeletal system. There's 5 pairs there, and there's one coccygeal, right at the coccyx, which is your tailbone. It's the very last little portion connected to your sacrum. Here, there's 1 pair of nerves in there. Okay, so there's 31 pairs total, and they're classified by the region of the spine that you find them coming out of. The spinal cord itself extends down, so this this kind of thick, all uniformly looking spinal cord part, it goes all the way down to the thoracic vertebrae. That last one. Just above the lower back, okay, so bottom of the mid-back. At that point, we'll see something called the caudal equina. It literally means horsetail, and that's a really fitting name. All these nerves branch out from this solid structure, where normally they would just come out from the side there, see in the pairs. In the lumbar region, the sacral region, the coccygeal pair, they come down like this horsetail-looking structure, okay, and that's called the caudal equina. And they branch out from there, but you can kind of see how it takes on this different look. Just glancing at what this looks like, if you've seen the model in my room, this is a perfect example of what the spinal cord, how it goes in that vertebral foramen, and how the pairs there would be one on this side and there'd be one on this other side. You can't see the pairs of spinal nerves come out. Of course, from there it would branch out into all parts of the body, okay, anywhere those peripheral nerves are going. This is just a cross-section view. I'm kind of looking top down, how the spinal cord runs in that vertebral foramen, and then it's protected very, very well by the vertebrae, and then how these spinal nerves branch off from the spinal cord. Looking at your cranial nerves, these are the nerves found in your cranium, your skull. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Most of them come into the brain stem. One set goes into your cerebrum. Don't worry about it too much. And they pass from the brain through the foramen magnum. Okay, this is the open part inside the brain. When we looked at the skulls inside the lab a few weeks ago, you may have picked one up and looked at the bottom, and there's this huge opening at the bottom. It's the foramen magnum, this big hole. Okay, and that's where the brain, these nerves pass in the brain, and also the brain stem sits down and connects to the spinal cord. Most of the nerves in the cranium are mixed nerves, meaning that they go both ways. Sensory, receiving signals go into the brain, and motor fiber nerves, which come from the brain going out to the different parts. These are some cranial nerves that you need to know the names of and basically what they control. Olfactory nerves, this controls smell. Anytime you hear the term olfactory, it has to do with your sense of smell, okay? So your sense of olfactory is the sense of smell. These nerves, of course, are going to have their end portions inside the sinus cavity, and then it branches up into the brain, or it connects up into the brain so you can process, certain smells. You smell something, ooh, it smells bad. And then, of course, that's going to trigger different parts of your brain that says, ooh, that smells like a skunk. I've smelled one before. Then you got your optic nerves, vision. These connect to the back of the eyeballs and then run all the way to the occipital lobe. Your oculomotor, this is the muscles surrounding the eyes, the eyelids, the eyeball movement. These nerves control that type of movement. So this one's just for vision. It's processing that sense of vision. These are aiding with movement, okay? So looking to the side or looking up or closing your eyes. Facial nerves, it's kind of just a lump together when there's several different types of facial nerves, but this controls your facial expression, tears, saliva, any things like that. Really, the facial expressions is the big one. It's why we have such a wide variety of expressions we can do with our face. Vestibulocochlear nerves, that got me today. Sense of hearing, okay? It's the sense of hearing. Anytime you hear cochlear, it's talking about hearing. Also equilibrium. I mentioned in one of the videos earlier about fluid in your ear. It aids in balance. It keeps us, on our feet. And the reason we get dizzy when we spin around, you put your head down on a bat or something, you spin around, or just as a kid, you spun around. There's fluid in your ears, and it keeps sloshing around even though your body has stopped. And that fluid sloshing around is what gets us off balance. The vagus nerves, this has to do with your heart and your digestive organs, also some parts of taste, but really more like those involuntary things. Hypoglossal nerves, this is what we do with our tongue, okay? So mainly speaking, when we move our tongue, how we know to move it in certain ways to make certain letters or sounds. Also chewing, swallowing, our tongue is used for that. A little fun biblical trivia if you're into that kind of thing. In the book of Acts, when they started speaking in tongues, hypoglossia is the term for that. So, and it comes back to the same root as these terms. Hypoglossal nerves has to do with the tongue. Hypoglossia, the biblical term for speaking in tongues. So that would be the Greek word for that. All right. So notice I didn't give you all 12 pairs of the nerves, but you do need to know, especially like olfactory, optic, hypoglossal. All right, so looking at brain injuries, this is the last part of your notes. We'll finish up with these brain injuries. A concussion, probably the most common that you've heard of, especially at your age where people start getting these concussions and they start getting diagnosed. You play football, you fall down, you get hit. It's a violent jarring or shaking of the cerebrum that results in a disturbance of brain function. In other words, it jostles your brain inside your cranium. It knocks it around inside your skull. Now remember, the meninges are there to pad it a little bit, and they do a great job of this. But sometimes, especially if we had like a car accident or something like that, your brain jostles at a rate that kind of still pushes through those meninges and still can hit your cranium. Okay, and so it jostles it around. It takes some impact, and that's what a concussion is. You might know the signs and symptoms of a concussion. There are several. Confusion, could be loss of consciousness. Sensitivity to light, even for days, if not weeks afterwards. And lots of concussions. The research is starting to add up. You probably have heard this if you follow sports. CTEs is a condition that can occur with numerous concussions. So you're really starting things like football, contact sports, or collision sports. You're starting to see, oh man, kid gets a couple concussions. We need to really start taking this serious because it can lead to severe mental impairment later on in various types of ways. Don't confuse concussion with contusion. Contusion is just another name for a bruise. It's not even close to the same thing. I like to include it in here just so you know they're different, completely different. Concussion is when the brain jostles inside their head or jars in the head. All right, so let's talk about a couple disorders, many of which you may be born with. Hydrocephalus. I know it's not PC or great, but for many, many years this was referred to as waterhead babies. Waterhead babies because hydro, water, cepha, head. There is water on the brain due to improper damage or drainage or reabsorption of cerebrospinal fluid. If you remember, cerebrospinal fluid is found in part of the meninges, and this fluid normally it drains out and it reabsorbs, just like other fluids in our body, and it does fine. When somebody's born with this condition, though, that cerebrospinal fluid is not moving in and out. So a lot of times it just starts to swell up, it starts to sit in, and this causes pressure on the brain, which can cause a lot of mental defects. So hydrocephalus. A stroke, also known as a cardiovascular accident, a CVA, most common by far nervous system disorder. All right, and this is where there's a blockage of blood circulation to the brain. So you might have a clot, and we'll learn more about clots when we get to cardiovascular system, but you have a clot stopping blood flow. Of course, it's just like stopping it up, putting a cork in it. Okay, and that clot stops up, and the brain is not able to get blood. As with anything, if any part of our body don't get blood, eventually it runs out of oxygen and that part dies. So a stroke can cause mental impairment because parts of our brain die from not having enough blood. Multiple sclerosis, there's several like telethons and things like that you may see on TV. This is a condition where the myelin sheaths in the central nervous system are gradually destroyed. So those axons that have those myelin sheaths surrounding them, they're not as efficient. So characterized by blindness, weakness in muscles, urinary problems. So you might wet yourself often. And it's a nervous system disorder now. But see how it affects the senses, it affects the urinary system, it affects the muscular system. Remember, we've talked about the nervous system is a control center for the body. So that's multiple sclerosis. Spina bifida, this is a birth defect. The vertebral column is not completely formed, so the spinal cord actually hangs out of the bone structure. Leaving it exposed is very, very dangerous. There are some operations that newborns with spina bifida could have, but they're very dangerous to do. I guess the risk may outweigh the reward. So a lot of times you have paralysis coming from this too, simply because that spinal cord is exposed. It has injuries. All right, so two interesting ones that people seem to like: insomnia. They can't go to sleep. Okay, they can't go to sleep. This is a nervous system disorder caused by certain inadequacies in the brain. I have a video for you on narcolepsy. Insomnia is simply where you can't sleep enough. Narcolepsy, oftentimes made fun of. It's kind of played for comical, things in movies, but this is where you lapse involuntarily into sleep during normal waking hours. Now, another marker of narcolepsy is waking up oftentimes while you're asleep. You may wake up 4 or 5 times in a 30-minute period while you're sleeping. Or you may have very vivid dreams because you're not really deep asleep. It's actually you kind of waking up and interacting with things. So narcolepsy, I think I'll have a video for that in a little bit. Parkinson's, hopefully we'll get to watch a movie called Ride with Larry in the coming next week. But this is a disease of the brain, but it's marked by uncontrollable shaking. Okay, and so there's a part of the brain that gets overacted, and you're not able to control your muscular activity, so it causes shaking, particularly of the hands. I'm sitting here doing it, as if you can see. But the hands, the arms, you'll see Larry in the video, or just look up anything with Parkinson's disease. Michael J. Fox, the younger actor in Back to the Future series, if you ever watched that, he's still alive. He has Parkinson's disease. He was diagnosed relatively young, and the Michael J. Fox Foundation is doing a whole lot of Parkinson's research, hopefully trying to find a cure for this disease that up until the last few decades really was not really well known. Didn't really understand it a lot. Now there's a lot being done with it, and hopefully, you never know, in your lifetime there may be a cure. Alzheimer's, another disease that is pretty sad. It's a degenerative disease. There is no cure for Alzheimer's. There are treatments, but at this time there's no cures. Characterized by memory loss, short attention spans. I've even heard people call it old timers, but it's Alzheimer's disease because it typically does affect older people, but it can be early onset Alzheimer's, which can affect people even as early as like 20 years old. Rare, very rare, oftentimes, most of the time seen in older people. And the last one is cerebral palsy. Injuries to parts of the brain affects the ability to use muscles. Okay, and this oftentimes happens at birth or soon after being born, sometimes even in delivery if there are certain complications with the mother delivering the baby. So cerebral palsy, you can live with this disorder, but oftentimes it leaves them partially paralyzed or with other disorders of the muscular system. Anyway, that is the end of these notes. Yay! Make sure you take your quiz and other activities on your Schoology page.